Greetings and salutations, friends, on Twitter, Rumble, Kick, and YouTube. So we are now multi-streaming, you and I, Vee. We have become international, somewhat, kind of.
Can you stream on Twitter, Noddy?
Yes, you can. Oh, do you have like a restream system set up for your stuff?
No, but like if you get a lot of subscribers on Kick, I'm interested.
Depends. Like, the Kick account is new. I think I'm at like 11 followers, so it's tiny.
But it is still 11 followers.
Yeah.
Hello, Kick.
If you want, to, I can show you how to set it up later, because there's no reason to not stream in all of these places. You know, followers are followers.
Yeah, I would love it. It's probably a little bit difficult to monitor all the chats, I guess.
Not that bad. You just set up the little pop-out chats and you can keep them all on one screen. Fairly simple.
I think I'll just do Kick for a start.
Alright. I'll send you a link afterwards, and when we're done, I can give you a brief rundown how to set it up. As a mosquito thing walks its way into my room.
Does it have malaria? Is it from Bill Gates?
It might. It very well might. Bill Gates and his bioengineered mosquitoes, which is an unironic thing that is happening right now.
Yes, I actually heard about it. Like, oh, conspiracy theory. And then you look it up and it's like, oh.
Yep, nope. Bill Gates is bioengineering mosquitoes.
Yeah.
What a world. But from bioengineered mosquitoes to another form of leeches suckling at the taxpayers' teeth, the Supreme Court rejects Biden's plan to wipe away $400 billion in students' debt.
Another gift from Trump, because he nominated the judges.
Yes, he nominated quite a few, and you can imagine they are reeing angrily now because it's a conservative majority. And before this, we were all like, okay, the Supreme Court has basically become a political body ruling along political lines, by and large. And they are ruling via legalistic fiat. And the opposition was like, no, the Supreme Court is great. The Supreme Court is awesome. It's fantastic. It's flawless. And now it's turned around, and you got people on Twitter posting pictures of guillotines again.
And the same with Twitter. Like, initially it was like, oh, my private company can do whatever it wants. And then Elon Musk buys it. And they're like, oh my god, they're billionaire. Like, the rich shouldn't be able to decide what people get to speak on.
How dare that billionaire take over?
Yeah. As if, it was the impoverished and the orphans that were running Twitter before Elon Musk.
Yep, just poor people. But this is the first of 3 huge rulings we're going to have to go over today, as the U.S. Supreme Court has begun the De-Woke-ification of America. At least the very first step, and later on we'll have a look at what happens to your country if you don't de-wokeify as well, as France very kindly has volunteered to give us all an example. What was amusing too is they actually they quoted Nancy Pelosi, of all people, in the rejection of the student loan thing by saying that Nancy Pelosi was like, no, the president can't do this, only Congress can.
Yeah. Because they know that they're going to create outrage, and at the same time they're like, okay, well, we need to have like something which I guess like turns PR in our favor, because the Supreme Court is aware that despite the fact that their decisions shouldn't be political, they really are.
Yes.
So they need to figure out ways in order to justify, at least lower the public outrage a little bit.
Yes. Because the issue is, we are currently in a very, very highly politically, excuse me, charged time right now. And so when they make decisions like these, obviously people are going to interpret them in a political light, especially when they're very partisan. Like, there's nobody on the right who is like, oh yes, let's spend $400 billion on student debt forgiveness. That seems like a sensible thing to do.
So what's interesting in the United States, right, is that if you go to a bank and you're 18 years old and you're like, well, I want to start a business, I want $40,000. They will laugh you out of the bank. In fact, they probably would call the Rockefellers so they come with a helicopter and they can be in the bank laughing at you as well. But if you go to the United States and you say, I want $100,000 because I want to go to a university and become an expert in lesbian dance mastery, they will be like, okay, well, sign here and here and here because the government is going to back your loan. But if you can't pay it in the future, if you can't find a job as the prestigious lesbian dance master, well, that's on you. You know, like they're going to follow you with that debt until you die. And that is like one of the major problems in the US. Like if you want to start a business, you don't get the loan. But if you want to go to university, they will give you a loan, no questions asked.
Mm-hmm. And it's in part because you have a right to higher education. So you can get a loan, and that loan will pay your way, and it will be at a very advantageous rate, much better than you're likely to get in the bank. It's going to be far more forgiving on when you can repay it, etc. Student loans are actually pretty damn soft things compared to, actual loans. Like you've got a mortgage right now. How forgiving is the bank going to be when you miss a few payments?
Oh, if you miss 1 month, they already talk about foreclosing.
Yeah, like this is an example of the infantilization of society, where people are looking at student debt and they're like, "Oh, this is incredible! There's no way we can handle this." Like, wait until you need a house.
And it's the definition of what really is education. Like in the beginning, it was like everyone needs to learn to read and write. Like this was what the communists in the Soviet Union and Karl Marx were talking about an education, right? Like do simple mathematics, learn to read and write. That was it. Nowadays, we're talking about like you're in your 20s and you're still doing an education, and then you hyper specialize into some shit that the economy may not even need.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so yeah, go on.
I know it is because you're entirely right. Like the idea of education has completely transformed. It used to be the idea that you get educated so you can get a job. That was the entire point of education.
Yeah. But now it's like instead of learning the ABCs, you got to start learning the LGBTs and like other things that aren't to do with getting a job.
Mm-hmm. And like there are people who spend decades, literally decades, studying random gay-ass nonsense, literally in some cases, and then they finally finish, and they're sitting there with a doctorate in homosexual science, homosexual dance science, presumably.
Queer theory. Yeah, like queer theory, for instance.
And they look around like, okay, I'm done studying. How do I feed myself on this degree?
Yeah, and then the student debt comes creeping in.
Yeah, because that's
and
one
they
of the
want
issues.
The working class to pay it, right? Because that's the thing. It's like they want the working class, like the people who didn't have the resources, or the people that were a little bit more careful with their finances, and they were like, okay, well, I can't afford a debt to the university, and they want them to pay for other people that weren't careful. You know what I would say? I would say that if you want that, let's make it so that you can get your money back, but you have to give the degree away as well. So, it's kind of like a refund. And you already benefit from the fact that you went to university, you got the connections, you studied the shit. But if you want your money back, you want your debt forgiven, then you can't claim you have a degree. Like it would be illegal, under penalty of perjury if you ever claim that you had the degree, because you do not. Like the university would not recognize that you actually studied there and that you got a degree because you got a refund.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that is really annoying about this, too, is so the forgiveness program would have canceled $10,000 in student loan debt for those making less than $125,000 or households with less than $250,000 in income.
Heresy's the question. Fire
less than $125,000. If you're earning $125,000 a year, I feel like you can afford to pay your debts, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's it was like them trying to buy votes, and the Democrats definitely managed to do that, right? So they get in power, they have the Senate, they have the House, they have the presidency. They don't pass any type of legislation on student forgiveness. And then when the midterms come up, they say, oh, if we win, we will pass student debt forgiveness. This is literally buying votes, right? And they set it up in such a way so that, like people would vote, even though like it was completely ridiculous, and you would encourage like the worst type of behavior using taxpayer money.
And bear in mind, too, like, there's no way Biden doesn't know this. He has more lawyers than most of corporate America.
Yes, yes. Like this was just a move. Like they don't want to actually, because like it's an advantageous thing. Like every time there's an election, they can say, well, if we win, we will abolish the student debt. And they don't have to do it, right? Like if they do it now, like what other campaign promise can they have?
Mm-hmm. And absolutely, like you're saying, it was an attempt to purchase votes because there were a lot of people, and mostly young people, who just, again, does not understand how real life works. Who are like, oh, what do you mean I need to pay back this? I thought there was just free money for me to live off for 5 goddamn years. It's not. I also want to point out the amount of support you can get in certain areas too. We'll have a look at Harvard later with the whole affirmative action thing. Harvard gives you a stipend on something like $60,000, which they just give you.
Wow. Isn't it interesting though how like the left complains about like evil, greedy corporations and banks, but they don't complain about evil, greedy universities? Because there's no fucking way learning queer theory should cost you $100,000.
Or evil, greedy individuals. As the thing is, too, I guarantee you, these people can pay their student debt. Bear you in mind, it's not like the government comes to you and goes like, right, so you owe $10,000, I'd expect that tomorrow, thank you very much. You have years and years and years, and if you still can't pay and you go like, I only earned this much, there are refinancing services. You can literally go to the student debt authorities and go like, okay, this is how much I can pay, and I can't pay anymore. There are rates on this. Now, to be fair, I'm making this assumption from a Norwegian perspective, because I know they are in our nation. Maybe the American state is just a hell of a lot more brutal on this. But, like, settling a debt tends to actually be rather flexible, because, of course, the person you are owing money to wants to get his money back too, regardless of whether that is a government or a bank or etc.
Ironically, if, let's say, you marry a woman and you don't have a job, and she divorces you, now you have to pay child support for her, right? Even though, like, before the divorce, you didn't earn money. Now, you need to pay child support, and if you don't, you go to jail. The government is more harsh with that shit than student debt.
And again, too, like the chat actually mentions it there. A lot of people just don't know how to manage money today. Unironically true. You'll see people going like, oh, I can't possibly afford to pay my student debt. They're driving a car, which they own or they rent. They live in an apartment, etc., which they own or they rent. They spend money at Starbucks, etc. Like, they live the lifestyle of an affluent individual in the West. And that money starts piling up fast. A coffee at Starbucks every day, and you're looking at a fair bit of money every year, and so on. It's not that people don't have the money, it is that they refuse to use the money correctly in an intelligent manner. And to be fair, a lot of these people probably never had to manage money before in their entire lives, so they have no idea how
Service
to.
guarantees citizenship.
Well, what really annoys me is the expression living from paycheck to paycheck, right? Because I know it's just an expression, but it's such a dumb one. Because if you have like someone that makes $4,000 and lives from paycheck to paycheck, right, he's basically insinuating that he is poor. And from his point of view, maybe he is, like maybe he's got a mortgage, maybe he's got like some bank loans and shit. But at the end of the day, like he lives maybe in a 3-room apartment by himself and has all the modern luxuries that the West can afford. But you have the expression living from paycheck to paycheck, which maybe he does, but like you can't compare it with someone from, I don't know, a third world nation that is struggling and is, without a house and living on the streets.
The question. Fire is the answer.
Oh, absolutely. You want me to tell you something goddamn hilarious? The definition of a poor person in Norway is that you can't partake in social activities. In other words, to be poor in Norway means you can't go on a vacation.
I mean, it depends on the style, like the living conditions of that country. So yeah, but if you're in Norway, you can't really complain about life. And are there Norwegians that complain though?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
do they view?
because again, we have. This is how the humans get used to things, you know. Like,
I have lost.
you buy your girlfriend flowers once, and she's happy. Twice, she's still happy. 3 times, getting less happy. 4th time, she's expecting it. 5th time, if you don't, she gets angry. You know?
Yeah, that is. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and in Norway, people are like, well, I own a house, I have a car, I have a job, I have a family of like 4 people, but I can't afford to go on a vacation, so I must be poor. Meanwhile, somebody in Africa is like, I can't eat.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even like I can't eat. I don't have money for medicine. Hell, I have money for medicine, but there's nowhere I can get it from.
So much of this is just down to people being unironically spoiled to high hell. Absolutely spoiled to high hell. And to further demonstrate this, there was another brilliant little article right here, which is this one. Students are refusing to pay back their loans after Supreme Court ruling. Like, I love it. I love that. Because, okay, you've taken all of this money. You've lived off it. You've gotten education of the government, of everybody else's tax money for years and years and years. And then when the bill goes due, you simply elect to go, and refuse to pay it.
It's not even like it matters. It's like, okay, the government never met the person that refused to pay a loan before. Oh, what will they do?
Yeah,
There's no procedure for this.
I wonder if there's some sort of system in place.
Probably not. I mean, like, can you imagine? Like, choosing not to pay for it? Oh, no one did that.
That's so weird.
Yeah, no, these people, you can see how spoiled and coddled they are with their little safe spaces. And when reality finally kicks in, they're going to be for a very rude awakening.
Yes. Krista PhD here says, maybe if we all refuse to pay back the students' loan back collectively, they'll get the point. I wonder what she's a PhD in. It's like, oh, maybe if we just all refuse to pay the government, they'll leave us alone.
I mean, technically, like, if everyone actually did it, they would have a problem because there's not enough space in prisons for all these people. But even then, like, you'd probably start making an example of the bigger fishes, and then all the little fish fall in line.
Well, that's the thing, they don't even need to throw them in jail or anything like that. In most of these countries, when you earn money in your paycheck, etc., often taxes and stuff will be deducted directly from it. Like if you committed a felony, for example, and you've been convicted to pay X amounts of taxes or reparations or whatever, government will just take your money. Remember what they did to Dankula? Where it's like convicted him to £800 and they just took it from his bank account?
I remember.
Like, you can choose not to pay, but the government's gonna take it regardless.
Yeah, they can even do nasty stuff like block your accounts.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is pretty much what the left asks for with the CBDC shit, and they always cheer when banks deplatform someone. Like Nigel Farage was deplatformed from a bank recently. And they believe that, oh, well, you don't pay. What is the government going to do? Well, just tell the banks to seize your assets. I mean, it's fucking difficult.
Again, you're not going to be a martyr over this. They're not going to send the stormtroopers to your house and kick down your door. They're just going to take the money. And you're going to want to sit there and whinge like, how can they do this? Because they're the government.
And the left wants the government to be more and more powerful every day, so...
Yep. It is dumb, and it speaks to a naivete that is just almost unbearable. This is a person that has spent years in a coddled bubble at some university, being told by teachers, "Oh, your perspective matters. Oh, you're so smart. You're so good," and then they meet the real world, and suddenly they're afraid. They're very, very afraid.
Is it that she doesn't know what she's talking about, or does she know the type of people that she is talking to?
Possibly.
like she knows her audience, the targeted demographic.
Well, it's also, again, the lack of actual education. Like next slide, students who refuse to pay back their loans by the millions. We need to start a revolution against those who are fleecing us financially. Straight out of the communist playbook. Like, oh, if we just begin la révolution, we will succeed. Like, this has been tried. It doesn't work.
Isn't that encouraging people to criminal behavior?
I suppose it is, V. I suppose it is.
Isn't it illegal? Well, probably not in the US, right? Because you have free speech. But here in Europe, if you encourage someone to commit a crime, that is called instigating someone to commit a crime, and it's punishable.
Oh. Well, we have one here, Corey, saying, I will not now, nor will I ever pay off my students' debt. I appreciate the effort, though. Again, these are incredibly spoiled people who are about to have a very rude encounter with reality, in all due likelihood.
Oh, I don't know if anyone actually will not pay their debt. Like that does sound like a talking point, but
I mean, they're not going to be given a choice. Like, if they ever get a job, the government does your taxes. Literally, they can look into all of your bank accounts. If the government sees you have money and then looks at like, she owes us money. Do you think
they're interesting how the government knows how much you have to pay, but you still have to do your own taxes?
Oh, it's annoying because of extra additional income and stuff, and they want to check also if you're being honest with them. Unironically, that is half the point of the tax papers is for them to check, like, okay, this doesn't match up with your bank account, sir.
Yeah, it's very. I mean, it's time consuming. If you have a bigger business, it's cash consuming because you gotta hire your accountants and shit.
And it's annoying. All right, so Lot of the Possum says hi. Hello. Hello, Lot of Possums. Owen says, unlike you too, during planting just become more comfy. Hello from Washington State. Hello, sir. Adherent of Lady Columbia says, I went to a community college and every semester was only 15,000-ish for about 3 to 4 classes. They're cheaper, better, and rather straightforward. 1,500-ish. Okay. So even then, like, $1,500 for a year. That's not that much.
It is kind of interesting that a lot of Americans don't just choose to come to Europe and do the universities here. Not only do you not get any of the woke bullshit, but they're cheaper. Even like living abroad is cheaper than doing it in America. And the diploma you get is recognized in the European Union. Like, for example, you can study medicine in Europe, and then you go to America, and there's like a step exam, it's called. So you get another exam, and then you're a doctor licensed in the US.
Urashima Otaro says, you can't declare bankruptcy on student loans debt because Obama. Oh.
Well, yeah, I mean, so in Europe, universities work like this. They are owned by the government. Like, we have the concept of a public university, and the government decides literally everything that happens in that university. And because of that, the prices are set by the government. Now, there is a parallel system of private universities, and the private university can't put outrageous prices because they are competing with the public ones that have the prices lowered. So in America, you don't have that. In America, all universities are private, as far as I know. Like, you do have state universities, but they're not the same like in the European Union. They operate by different standards. Like, they have more autonomy, basically. But my point is, when the government says you can go to a bank and get a loan, that all these universities just outrageously increase their prices because now they know that people can afford it.
Guarantees citizenship.
And no one is pointing that out. Like, you don't see any leftists complaining that universities are greedy. You don't see that any leftists complaining. It's like, well, hold on a little bit. Like, why are the universities like having so many frivolous stuff and there's no quality control? Like, why is there no quality control if you go and become a queer theorist and they don't say it's like, okay, you do this, only 0.5% of people that graduate this will have jobs? Why is there none of that?
Mm-hmm. Well, you raise an excellent point there as well, because This is one of the reasons why the medical industry is so laughably expensive. Because by and large, it is the government that engages with the medical industry. And the government has infinite money because it'll just print more if it ever runs out. Now, a lot of stuff in the medical industry costs a lot regardless because of the ludicrously high standards you need. For example, you can only use a scalpel blade once, for example, and then it must be tossed out, remelted, reforged, etc. But for stuff like medicines, a lot of that is paid for by the government. And since the company knows that the government has to pay for this, they have to buy it because they are obliged by law to do it, why wouldn't you increase prices?
I mean, you're absolutely right. And no one is bringing this to the conversation.
Yeah. Because the same would happen with universities. If the government in America had like, oh yeah, we're just going to pay for everything, then the private universities are going, well, if you say so.
Yeah. But not only that, it's supply and demand, right? I mean, the universities can't teach an entire population. Like they have a finite number of students that they can have. And if you have like, let's say 40 spaces for one group of students and you have like 500 wanting to come in, you're just going to increase the price until you only have like 40 that are willing to pay as much.
Mm-hmm. It's also the entire idea that higher education is simply not necessary for everyone. Like, you should go for higher education if you have something specific in mind, if you have a goal in mind, if you want to become a doctor, for example. But if you're going to become like a carpenter,
Service guarantees
you
citizenship.
don't need to go to Harvard.
Well, here's the problem, right? Like, this is a saying that exists in Romanian culture, and I'm pretty sure you may have heard it in other countries as well. But it's you need to go to a university to avoid menial labor.
Mm-hmm.
Like menial labor, so the working class is something that you must avoid. Like, it's a punishment, right?
Yes.
It's because you're stupid, dumb, and uneducated,
Service
and you couldn't go
guarantees
to a
citizenship.
university, so you ended up being like a truck driver or something. And because of this, like, everyone wants to go to a university. Now, even the jobs that you talk about, like being a doctor, let's say you become a veterinarian, right? Like, what do? You open another vet clinic that's for puppies and kittens next to the 10 other vet clinics that are open on the same fucking street. Yeah. So you're now making life difficult for all the other veterinarians, right? Because the market literally cannot accumulate all of these specialized people. Now, meanwhile, the plumber is making dough. The truck driver was making like $6,000 per week in California during COVID, right? And they're laughing. But what's interesting is that the university graduates, they're so full of themselves and they think like they're above the truckers. It's like the journalists who think they're above the code, and they're looking with snark and disdain. It's like, oh yes, they're making more money than me, but they don't have an education. Like, they're stupid people, right? So it's the cultural thing that also plays into it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because the thing is, there is absolutely like a top end of this where you need a lot of education to become a high specialized person, you know, which requires a lot of education. And that time investment is then returned via a high salary, you know. If you want to become a surgeon, for example, that is absolute ludicrous amounts of education and training, and the salary is supposed to reflect that, obviously. But how many surgeons exist in the world? What 0 point something % of the population are these people? Meanwhile, there are very few people who couldn't become a plumber, and in all due likelihood, the plumber is going to earn more than most of these college graduates.
But it's not only that. There's a shortage now. Like, if you have like a flooded toilet, it's so difficult to get in touch with the plumber.
Mm-hmm.
At least in my country. I don't know how it's like in Norway, but you know, and this is essential. Like, you need plumbers to run a society. You don't need gender dancing lesbian instructors.
Absolutely. Because, of course, we now have a greater demand for aforementioned menial labor than we have for veterinarians.
Yeah, and even veterinarians, you know, like, if you're a vet that goes to a farm and takes care of the farmer's cattle and stuff, like, yeah, that's something that may be needed. But if you open another vet clinic for puppies and kittens, then Unless you do another 4 years of trading and you specialize on exotic animals like lizards and parrots and stuff, and maybe then, but like, how many people have lizards and parrots, you know?
Yep. Black 1917 says, Hail ArchChrist, our Lord and Savior, and hi Vee.
Hello.
Andrew Schmidt says, ask Vee what a falling block rifle uses. What does a falling block rifle use, Vee?
I do not know what a falling block rifle is.
Well, clearly, it is a rifle that falls blocks.
Then maybe it uses blocks?
Does it use blocks?
I don't know. I do not know what a falling block rifle is.
Well, it's a bit of a trick question. Let's put it like that.
I do not know.
Vee is confused by this. To be fair, that is a fairly rare thing. It's a lever action rifle, and it's single shot as well.
Oh, so then bullets.
Yes, they use bullets. That is correct.
Okay.
They do use bullets.
Yeah, but if you put like a single shot, then it's a bullet.
Yeah, a bullet.
Unless it's a bell.
It uses bullet.
Like that is also a single shot. Or
So
a grenade if it's a grenade launcher.
That is true too.
That is also, yeah, or a rocket if it's a rocket launcher.
So John says, here in Ireland, students are complaining that they can't get any lodging because the illegal aliens they supported are being given their lodgings. The current generations are not that bright. Yeah, no, that is another thing too, because, God, this the topic of economy is a massive one, because getting a house, of course, today is not easy.
I have lost.
It is very, very difficult, and it's usually going to require you taking up a very, very large loan, because we're not building anywhere near enough houses. And the reason why we're not building anywhere near enough houses, because our population is increasing far more rapidly than births are.
Yeah. I mean, the reason in Romania 90% of the population has housing is because of emigration. Like, people actually left. And because of that, the housing market is incredibly cheap. I mean, I live in a house that has another floor, right? Like a 4-room house, $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
And this is considered expensive here, right? So
I'm
I'm
lost.
curious, like in California now, what you can buy for $100,000.
Oh.
And I'm talking about dollars, like not Romanian money, like just USD.
Oh, absolutely. Like the differential is enormous. Let me actually see if I can find you here, because I know the Americans got a good laugh of this when I talked about this once before, because now switching to Norwegian because I'm reading a Norwegian website whilst I'm doing this. The housing prices in Norway are ridiculous, like actually genuinely ludicrous. Let's see
Service
here.
guarantees citizenship.
Right. Okay. I'm gonna send you a picture here. Okay, so I'll put this in the link chat, and I'll show it to the chat as well. So this is an apartment right here. You can look at the pictures. You know, it's a decently sized apartment too. It's not too bad. It's got 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, you know, a couple of bathrooms. It's a pretty nice little apartment. What would you think would be the price of this apartment in, like, USD?
Let me think. It's very difficult because I don't know, like, the difference of the nation. It matters a lot. Supply and demand.
Of course.
But in Romania, something like this would be $60,000.
60,000. Okay.
Yes.
That's
And
not
we're talking no furniture, right?
no furniture.
Okay.
That's not too far off. The price of this apartment is a bit over $80,000.
You know what's interesting? And this mind blows Americans and British people. When you rent here, like because I live in a city that's filled with universities. So there's a lot of people from universities that come here and they want to rent something. You have to give furniture.
Mm-hmm.
Like you cannot rent without furniture. No one will take the rent because the competition
I
is
have
so
lost.
high.
shit.
that the landowners, the landlords are fighting with each other, and they're trying to offer better deals for the students. So the idea that you would rent a house and bring your own furniture is just doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can, like you can talk with the owner. And it's like, oh, I want to bring my own furniture, and if he can make accommodations, he will. But the idea is that people who rent, if you bring your own furniture, then you have to take it back. So like a lot of people won't have like where to take it back to, because they're university students. So, but yeah, I mean, this mind blows Americans. Like, what do you mean? Like it's already furnished when you move in?
I'm sure it does.
Yeah, and take into account $80,000, right? You make a down payment of like, I guess it's like 10,000 or something like that, right? Now, usually it's I think it's like 15%. And then you have like what? Maybe $100 per month to pay to the bank for 30 years. Maybe 200.
Hold on. I'm just looking. Ah. Yeah, that's where the confusion is coming from. I said 80,000, didn't I?
It's 800,000, isn't it?
Yep, it's 800,000. Yep.
Okay.
I misspoke because I was looking at chats and I'm like, that's cheap. I'm like, what? That's not cheap. It's like, no, it is 800,000, or precisely, I looked at it now, $777,000, $100,000.
Yeah, but in Romania the price
Misspoke,
is what
sorry.
I said it would be. Yeah.
But yes, 800 something. That is the price, something like that.
Yeah.
And for students, it's even worse. Like, it is almost impossible to get any sort of, even renting for a student is very hard here, because entire families wants to buy houses now, and like entire families will squeeze themselves into houses originally meant for students because there isn't any real other options.
I mean, yeah. But if you like everything in the world, right, including dating, is all about supply and demand. So if you're going to bring in tens of millions of people that need housing, like obviously the demand is going to rise and the supply is going to lower. It's not fucking rocket science.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even an older house in Norway will cost you a couple $100,000. There we go. For example, this one here, I'll show you. So you mentioned you've got a two-story house. This is a two-story house. It's slightly of the older variant. The price for this one is about $200,000.
Yeah.
And it's not very large. If you see it from the outside, you can tell it's not a particularly large house. Built in 1962.
Yeah. Again, you can literally look at various countries and notice that, yes, like migration does affect housing prices. You can even look at cities, right? Like university cities that have like a university there, and you require students to live in that city for like a finite amount. You can notice like how the prices fluctuate. And they're a lot more expensive during the beginning of the year because like that's when the students look for housing and stuff. And then they drop because like there's less interest, like now all the students have managed to find rent and they don't really look for new places, so the price is lower. It's not fucking rocket science, right? Like the idea that the left tries even to argue that immigration doesn't cause housing prices to increase is absolutely fucking ridiculous.
Absolutely. Chad is asking what's the difference between a new and an old house. Well, it's about to do with maintenance and how much you need to put into it to actually make it livable and, up to standards, etc. For a new house, you'd need to double the price at the very least. Like you're looking at $400,000 roundabout, probably.
Yeah.
And therein also lies a bit of the problem. Like, people don't understand how to deal with money anymore because we've made everything so ludicrously expensive that student loan, for example, you don't understand what a loan is. You know, if that is a lot of money, you're not going to understand what it is to get a house or to get a car, etc. And when most of the property is bought up, like, Americans have it very lucky because American housing prices are still very good competitively.
Yeah.
Troy Davidson says, American who never attended college, unlike most Zoomers, I have no debt to speak of. Job opportunities seems very low, however. I feel more informed now than in high school as to college course selection. I will say that, though, because that is a good counterpoint as well. There are way too many menial jobs, as we call them today, that require college and stuff. Like, you're gonna sit in the register of some shop, and they're like, "Do you have a college degree?" I'm like, no. Do I need one?
Yeah. No, that's the supply and demand thing we talked about earlier, right? Like, there are certain jobs that my parents got, which didn't require a university degree, but now they do. And if you operate a business, doesn't matter what, right? Like, let's say you want someone to edit your YouTube videos, and you got like 1,000 applications. Now, in your case, it's different because you actually own the YouTube channel. But if you're a person that was hiring for someone else, you know, you would look at like, okay, well, which one of you has a university degree or something like that, you know, to justify your hiring practices, to justify why you hired this person over the other.
And in that case, you know, having the college degree makes you more valuable, if for no other reason than because you have demonstrated an ability to sit still for extended periods of time, do boring work for extended periods of time, and not shoot anybody, which, you know, is good. Tanas Shvenko says, according to the Sovereign Citizen, you just write accepted for value on your your bills and debit. That was the what was it? I've heard about this ages ago. It was something in reference to some sort of American law from back in the day, which gave you a reason to, what was it? What was it? It was a really dumb thing. It allowed you to own the bill, so you didn't have to pay it anymore or something. It was weird. I didn't understand half of it, and I barely paid attention to it, but maybe there's some sort of legalistic loophole to get out of it. Somehow I doubt it. The government tends to be good at closing those, but... Sandum says, I see the dev is not here. I still have the bonking stick of silence at the ready. V does get on tangents that deserves a bonking for quiet time. That is true. He does occasionally do that.
You can always cut me off if I start rambling, but
That's rude.
when you get me and Dev in the same stream, it usually ends up with you hiding the stream out of shame.
I'm genuinely playing with the idea of doing, like, the VODs as Rumble exclusives, because you can feel when YouTube is watching. And that one, I could feel YouTube watching, you know?
No, you're right. I mean, I used to have streams that had a lot more subscribers, because now I get, like, maybe 200 views. But I used to have, like, 600, 800 views. And I felt uncomfortable because YouTube is watching. And I started streaming at irregular intervals. I started deleting my streams. I started censoring myself. I stopped having guests. And because of that, I got all the way to 200. But I feel that if I could just say what I think and be able to have the same streams I used to and get guests again, I feel that I would be able to get the same numbers again like I had.
Probably. Phantom Lord DJ07 says, as a US Navy veteran, I can say the DoD makes a mistake in government's favor. It is the next paycheck if it is for you for it takes 3 months. If it is for you, it takes 3 months. Oh yeah, absolutely. If you owe the government money, they're gonna get on that shit toot sweet. If the government owes you money, it's gonna take a while. The government owes me $7,000 after the last round of taxes. If I'm lucky, I'll get it sometime in the next 6 months.
Do they actually give you the cash, or do you have to pay less the next time you pay taxes?
They will give it back to me. It's just that it takes a while.
Interesting how they never make mistakes in your favor.
That's weird. Gary Thomas says, anybody else remember when you could pay your college fees with a part-time summer job? My, how times have changed. Oh, absolutely. Like, working your way through college used to be a thing. Like, that used to be the norm, in fact. And to be fair, the demands of a modern education are often significantly higher than they were back in the day. But considering the party culture and the supposed thing that people go to college just to freak out for a few years, you probably could afford to have a summer job and study on the side. Matthew Rumbler says, I would pay mine back, but history degrees don't pay. That is true. Like, if you want to put your history degree to work, dude, start a YouTube channel. Unironically, it's a better bet than getting a job out of it. ARC5 says, because V, if the leftists had to admit that the government paying for things made them cost more, they would have to rethink their worldview. That is correct as well. Like, that is the problem with making everything free, because nothing is, of course, ever actually free. Somebody's got to pay with it, and if it's going to be the government, the price is probably going to increase. Taras Svenko says, beyond healthcare and education, notice that home prices in the US went into a bubble when the government said housing is a right, give everyone home loans and damn the consequences. Oh yeah, again, absolutely. Like, when you say that everybody could get a thing, first and foremost, you drive up demand, because now everybody can get the thing by definition. And then people are going to go like, oh, well, shit, do we have enough supply? No? Okay, well, we're going to have to raise prices then. And if the government is paying for it, or the bank is paying for it, etc., there is no logical reason to stop raising the prices, really, without being called out on it and by the rest of the market, essentially.
Well, it's also the fact when you say, like, everyone should get a thing. The question is, like, is there that thing to go for everyone? Like, is there enough of the
Fire
thing,
is the
right?
answer.
This is why communists have, like, these massive buildings, these, like, the communist blocks, in order to give everyone the thing. But the question is, you know, like, when you think of a house, like, what do you think, Arch? Like, what is your vision of a house?
Well, my vision of a house would be the house I grew up in, essentially.
Well, the vision of the government is what communists would call, like, a matchbox. You got your little kitchen, which is like the size of a small jail, a prison cell, right? And then you have, like, the one room where you have your bed, your desk, your TV, and that's your house, right? So, and they expect, like, 3 or 4 people to live there.
Oh, absolutely. Like, that's why you can see, like, pictures from the old Soviet Union, for example, or hell, even today, of just these enormous areas filled with block housing. And the inside of them is, as you described, they're goddamn tiny. And this is also why, whenever I go to foreign places, I can kind of tell that it's not Norway, not by the locale or the style, but by the interior decor of everything. Because Norway is an incredibly spoiled country, and we've developed a very unique style when it comes to our houses and decor, in that everything is nice. Like, even the poorest Norwegian family's house is fairly nice. And nobody ever really imagines a house, as you said it, to be this tiny little matchbox thing. That is not the Norwegian definition of a house at all. Like, even the Norwegian definition of an apartment is probably like 5 or 6 rooms at least.
Yeah, but I guess, like, your population probably allows for this type of luxury, because if you had, like, 20 more million Norwegians moving in, then
Exactly.
you would think about the communist blocks, yeah.
like, there's only 5 million of us, and so you can have enormous areas of empty space. And the thing is, too, the moment you make housing a right is when you encounter problems, because now you've got to house everybody. And that's not that easy, especially when you need to build enough adequate housing for everybody. I mean, even just what you call the matchbook house, right? Even then, you can probably only house a few hundred, maybe a couple thousand people in one enormous block. And we're talking about populations in the millions, the tens of millions, the hundreds of millions. Like, you're going to have to pave over half the country at that point to just fill it with condiments.
I have lost shit.
Yeah, and the idea that it's a human right. I mean, if you're on an island, right, you're shipwrecked, and you don't have a house, is the island violating your rights?
Presumably,
Like, because that's the thing, you know. Like, if you have a right, it means that if it's not fulfilled, someone is violating. So, for example, you have the right to live, right? And if someone kills you, that is the person who violated your right. But in the case of like free gifts, if you're not being given, like, who is violating your stuff?
Well, that's the thing. Back in the day, the definition of a right was something that couldn't be taken away from you. Basically, it's something that you had naturally.
Yes. Like
Whereas
the right
now,
of movement.
Yeah, now a right is whatever the government is currently giving you.
No, but that is such a good point. Yes, like right is like a human right should be something that you already have and can't be taken away from you, and you have since birth. So, for example, the right to free speech, right? Like you have the right to move your mouth and make vocal sounds any way you please, and it can only be taken away from you if people force you or punish you if you don't.
It requires an external force.
Yeah, the right of movement, right? Like you have the right to just travel, and it can be taken away from you when someone puts you in prison, or someone kidnaps you or abducts you. The right to bodily autonomy and so on and so forth. But I think like you managed to articulate it perfectly. Like it can't be a right, like a human right, if you don't already have it. So, for instance, the right to free housing. It's like, well, you know, like you have the right to own your house if it's your private property and you own it. Like no one should take it away from you. But you don't have the right for someone to build you the house.
Mm-hmm. Which is actually a very interesting point, because that leads us nicely into the next Supreme Court thing that happened. Let's see if I can find it here. Ah, yes. So, one of the other things that occurred is that Supreme Court strikes down Biden's student loan relief plan and limits LGBTQ rights. Oh my, what happened, V? Did they pass a law about lynching or something?
I'm pretty much sure like something about misgendering or...
Something about misgendering. Well, that does sound like it could happen, but no. What happened... you remember the whole the bake the cake controversy, right?
Yes.
Yes. So what happened here is there was a web designer who's a Christian who wanted to make website designs for marriages, but she didn't want to make website designs for gay couples because she didn't believe in it. And this made it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in her favor. Because, to me, like this is fundamentally retarded, right? Because this is a special privilege. This is a special right that we have given to LGBTQ people, etc., and the minorities. Because you don't have the right to force somebody else to work for you. Like, obviously.
I mean, okay, so I always understood how the law works in the United States, but it's shocking that Americans themselves don't understand it. I mean, right-wing Americans do, but like you have the left. If you are a business that offers a service that's already made, so for example, you're a bakery and the cake is already in the window, then you can't refuse a customer based on their, arbitrary traits. So you can't say, well, no, black people are allowed to buy the cake, right? Because that's discrimination. But if you are asked to create something then you can refuse, right? So like if for example, someone comes in and says, I want you to make a cake with the Jesus that has a dildo sticking out. Like you can refuse to create that because you do not believe in it. You cannot write things that you do not believe in it. You cannot create art or music and think that you. Imagine if you go to a leftist and you say, I want you to create me a Nazi song, right? Like, of course they can say no.
Mm-hmm. And
Or you know, like I'm
difference is-
or even better, I'm a white person and I'm proud in my whiteness. I want you to make a song about it. Like they can refuse.
Yep. And again, the difference is very, very simple. It is whether or not something already exists. As you say, like, because when you put something out on the market, you have no power to decide who wishes to purchase the thing you placed on the market. If you have a cake, anyone can buy the cake. If you've made a sausage, anyone can buy the sausage. But what is the differential here is you are now employing somebody to do a thing for you. You are hiring them for a service to do a job. And you cannot force someone to do a job for you. In the same way that you can't go to a plumber and go like, fix my toilet. Like, odds are he's going to do so because, you know, but he doesn't have a legal requirements to do what you tell him to do.
I mean, I think it's a question if a plumber can refuse to go to black people's homes. Is that discrimination?
Well, that's if
Because it's
now we're getting into intent. That's the thing. And the problem with that is intent used to be something that was very difficult to prove because we had a very high burden of proof for it. These days, intent is assumed. It is attributed to almost everything. Like, if you decide to not go to that person's neighborhood, for example, the plumber goes like, "No, I don't want to fix your toilet, dude." And he's black, then everyone will go, "Oh, it's because he's black and the dude's a white supremacist."
no,
When he
no,
might
but
just
I'm
be.
talking. I'm talking where the intent is 100% proven. So like the web
yeah.
designer goes like, I don't want to make websites for gay people, right? So like there's no question about the intent. Like it's obvious, you know, that as a Christian, they do not support the beliefs that gay people can get married. So is that
Heresy's the question.
like is
Fire
that
is the
discrimination
answer.
or not? Right? Now we can say that it's not because this type of work involves creativity. So like it involves you actually writing stuff and drawing stuff or something that you don't believe in. But a plumber doesn't necessarily have the same level of creativity. Like, sure, there is creativity in how you unclog the toilet and whatnot, but like doesn't have to do something that goes against his beliefs, right? And he like can just choose out of malice to not help certain people.
That introduces the question of beliefs again. So now we need to define the beliefs, like your religious beliefs. Okay, so your religious belief as a Christian is that you can discriminate against gay people in forms of marriage, and that's okay. It's one of those issues where you've codified certain things where you might as well then go to a KKK member and go like, hey, why don't you help this black person? It's because like, I don't believe in it. Like it's a stupid differential. It should be very simple in that you don't have a right to somebody else's services. And in 99.9% of situations, this will never be a problem. Because even if you go to this graphic designer and go like, oh, I'm sorry, like I can't take this job right now, just go find another one. Like, when I contact an artist on Twitter and go like, hey, can you draw for me? They might go like, no, you're a fascist. Okay. Like, this has happened multiple times to Rags. Like, he's posted in our super secret Discord chat where he tries to make his furry pornography, despite not being a furry, totally. And the artist goes like, oh, I don't want to do that because you're a Nazi. Like, okay. You're wrong, but that's fine.
It's interesting because, you know, like, you can discriminate based on ideology, but you can't discriminate on sexuality. But sometimes sexuality and ideology does mix when the sexuality has a flag, and it also comes with certain
and a
suppositions
month.
about the world.
And a holiday.
And a month, yes, and it also believes, like, what was it? Carlos Maza says, be gay, be socialist, right?
Yep.
But what if I want to be gay and a Trump supporter? Well, no, because now you're a fascist, you know? So, the question is, though, right? Like, you can refuse some people, and as you say, you can go to others. But I do believe that these activists are specifically targeting Christian bakeries. They do not target Muslim bakeries. They do not target Jewish bakeries, right? They go to the Christian ones because they know they're going to be turned down, and they know that they can make a spectacle out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they feel discriminated because of like it's kind of like, you know, if I go to like this very famous leftist that you said, and he is an artist, and I go to him, it's like, hey, I want you to draw for my game, and he says no. Sure, you know, but at the end of the day, I go like, well, it's his right. It's not like he's the last artist on Earth. Like, I can find someone else.
Mm-hmm. And this is also because it's a power play. That's what this actually is. As you say, if we run into a person who's like, no, I'm actually a raging leftard, it's like, okay, yeah, fair enough, have fun. And that's the end of the discussion. It never occurs to us to go like, well, I'm going to have to sue you now. Meanwhile, this is, of course, what they are doing here. And it is, as you say, it is a power play. It is because they know they have a privileged position in society. Nobody else gets to sue a website designer for not being willing to work for them.
Well, let me tell you something else. And this actually happened, right? So I go to this Japanese artist, which is very renowned, and he worked on other video games. And he tells me that, well, actually, I wasn't the one talking with him. I sent someone that speaks Japanese to discuss. But he comes back and says he doesn't want to work for a Westerner because he believes it would poison his brand.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as disappointing as that is, I understood. And it's like, okay, you know, I could have made a big deal out of it. And I could have gone on Twitter and said, oh, look at this guy. He's a racist. And I would probably even get, like, more attention on my video game by doing so. But why though? You know, I do respect. Like, why would I even want an artist that doesn't want to work with me to force him to work with me? You know?
Because power. Like unironically, that is it.
Mm.
It is the collectivist ideology. Like again, like you say, you can say that this is a sexuality, but when the sexuality has a flag and a parade and a month and a holiday, etc., and they act like it is a political tool, at some point you've got to call the trees a forest, I suppose.
Mm. Yeah, apparently Steven Crowder tried doing this to a Muslim bakery, and of course, like, they don't want to do it, right? So it's not like they didn't know that Muslim bakeries exist. It's just simply because they do know the political zeitgeist.
Well, yeah, that's also because you can do this to Christians, and it's okay. Like, I remember there was a stand-up comedian who was asked, like, why he doesn't do jokes about Muslims, and this was during the heyday of Muslim nonsense going on, you know, when bombs were exploding all over the place. And he simply said, I don't do jokes about Muslims because they might do something, but a Christian won't. And that really is how simple it is. The Christians are at the absolute lowest end of the pecking order. You can do anything to them, and it doesn't matter. I mean, there are active, like, mass murders of Christians going on in the Middle East right goddamn now in certain places. Have you heard the media cover that shit? Nah, because it's Christians.
I think that this is the reason why the corporations were so shocked at the Bud Light thing, and they refused to cover what actually happened. So the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence.
Oh God, yes, that one.
They are incredibly antagonistic towards Christians. It's not just the fact that they're dressing as nuns and, you know, they're obviously mocking Christianity. Like during Easter. And I'm not a religious person, but like from my limited understanding of Christianity, I believe that Easter is considered their most holy day. And during Easter, they had this guy on a cross, and they're twerking on it, and you know they're mocking the resurrection. Incredibly offensive for Christians, right? And this is why the people supporting the Dodgers, which are part of the Latinx community, they felt that no, like if you want to have like your LGBT stuff, which like literally any other group is doing, at least don't get the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, right? But this is what the left does. They're being incredibly antagonistic and aggressive. And when they get even the smallest backlash, they act like victims. They act like this was about LGBT stuff and not about them mocking Christians.
Absolutely. And so, you said Bud Light, but I'm pretty sure this is the Dodgers.
The Dodgers. Yeah, my bad.
Yes, the Dodgers team. So they set up a thing with the Sisters of
Guaranteed
Perpetual
Citizenship.
Indulgence, which is their actual name. And yes, like they are deliberately provoking Christianity specifically. They are going out of their way to antagonize Christians as much as possible, to mock them, to mock their religion, and take the piss out of them in every single way, to denigrate it. Can you imagine if this was done to Islam? Like, can you imagine the fucking outrage? It would be a hate crime. Literally, it would be a hate crime.
It's not only that. Well, probably in America it wouldn't, because they have free speech, and there's now even in Sweden the burn the Quran thing that's happening, and
that's been going on for quite some time.
Yeah, but no, I agree. Like no one would question if like what was it? Actually, Dawkins, right? Like Dawkins, one of the 4 riders of the apocalypse or whatever he was called. Right, the moment he gets against the Muslims, he gets suspended from talkings and speeches, and the university disavows him and all that shit. And no one is saying, well, you know, they're discriminating against him, or no. It's like, well, you went against the faith, and now you're being punished, right? But if Dawkins was like LGBT or something, like no one would have said that he's being discriminated for being gay. They would say, well, you're being discriminated because you're going against the faith.
Mm-hmm. And again, I want to stress this point because it is so important. This group of people are not doing this as a form of expression. They are not doing this because this is who they are. This is done deliberately, provocatively, antagonistically against the Christian faith. That is the target. That is the express stated goal of this group. Like, if you want to talk about bigotry, here you go.
Yeah. But again, it's just acceptable, right? And what's interesting with Bud Light, going back,
I want to actually mention that it's not just acceptable; it's laudable. It is something that deserves to be praised. That is the ridiculous part.
And I will tell you why that is. But before we get to that, the Bud Light thing, the backlash they got, and the Dodgers and all of the Target. The reason YouTube, I think, was censoring videos in the beginning and they were panicking is because they do not want Christians to have an identity. They do not want to become conscientious consumers and be like, okay, well, if you're mocking us, we're not going to buy your product. Because the current marketing, the woke marketing way, is you antagonize the Christians. And when the Christians get upset, you got the leftists that attack them. And then you have like the buzz, you generate the controversy going around on Twitter, and your brand is trending, and that's free advertisement. And you get some nice ESG money from the investors, and everything is good, right? But the moment the Christians can actually do something to hurt you by not purchasing your product, oh, that's going against this level of marketing. It goes against the late stage woke capitalism.
Yep. And again, it is because Christians have just been the accepted targets. You could do anything against them and it was just okay. And that also meant that the corporations went along with it because they never retaliated. And now that it is happening, I believe we will see a rather rapid turnaround for a lot of this. And I also just want to point out, you remember the Oscars, right? When the dude dressed up in the devil costume and did that whole thing?
Yes, and it got Sargon suspended for covering it, yeah.
Yes. I just want to point out how unbelievably cringe this shit is. How unbelievably not counterculture this shit is. Because 30 years ago, no, less, 20 years ago, when the conservative Christians were in power, all of us had a lot of fun poking fun at Christianity, like the skeptic movement, for example, the pre group of Gamergate.
Thunderfoot versus Venofag.
Yeah, that was an anti-Christian, conservative Christian movement, essentially, going like, oh, do you believe in the spaghetti monster in the sky, etc.? But that was when they were the dominant culture. Making fun of them then was making fun of the establishment. They haven't been the establishment for 2 decades. And there's a difference between going like, okay, well, do you believe this? This is a bit silly. And doing something like what these people are doing, which is deliberately antagonistic.
I do think the punching up, punching down that the left talks about does exist to a certain degree, but it's not enforced like they want to. Like no one decides, well, this is punching up and this is punching down. But like, for example, if you go to a homeless person and you mock and ridicule them, like most of society is going to look at you like you're a piece of shit, right?
Exactly.
And the thing with the Christians, when they were in power during the Bush era, like you had some examples, not all, but like some of them were absolute twats.
Oh yeah.
The God Warrior, oh my God, Dungeons and Dragons is creating Satanism, and any child that plays it, like that.
Video games are satanic, rock music are satanic, etc.
Yes, and they like a lot of people think that before social media you didn't have cancel culture. You had the concerned citizen letter.
Oh yeah.
And there were organizations like I think it was called the Million Moms or something like that. And they would start like mail writing campaigns, and they would try to create negative publicity and get corporations canceled for using curse words in commercials, for having certain statements that they believed were anti-Christian, like all of that shit, They were the piety warriors.
I have lost.
Like this whole thing with social justice activists, like yes, they have a different ideology. No one is doubting that. But the behavior of cancel culture used to have a previous name. It was called persecution. So like you're basically persecuting people for their beliefs, and the Christians used to do that towards atheists, towards other Christian denominations. Like Catholics would do it to Protestants and vice versa. But that was when they were in power. Now they're not in power anymore. So attacking Christians who aren't in power is making you really cringe, as you pointed out.
Yes. And I want to point out too, the leftist term punching up, punching down, the key difference is that is defined by the left. It is a set of rules of engagement that they set on who you are allowed to mock and not mock. Whereas in reality, everyone understands this automatically and intrinsically. You know that the homeless guy, as you mentioned, is below you, which is why you don't get to mock him. It's the same with how teenagers today are beginning to rebel against woke culture because they recognize that it is the establishment. Like, people will naturally recognize who is in charge because they're everywhere, and so they will rebel against it.
I mean, here's a perfect example. During the BLM riots, and you had like all these videos on Twitter where, they're burning shops and they're setting fire to places. And no one complains, but at one point, there is this guy which sets fire to a mattress. And this homeless guy walks in, it's like, what are you doing? This is my home. This is my home, right? So he's like incredibly dismayed about what's happening, very upset. And even the leftists, like even the BLM supporters, like even like this transcended even race. During the BLM riots, they were saying, yeah, what that guy did was awful. Like he was a piece of shit. Because it was punching down. Right, like you have the person that's like the BLM protester, which could go out during the COVID lockdowns, could do anything, and there were books that were on Amazon being promoted in defense of looting and all that shit. But when that protester, that the entire culture and mainstream media apparatus was defending, when that protester set fire to a homeless man's mattress, that was punching down. Like even the left looked at that and said, yeah, that's disgusting.
Yeah. Because when you are actually going after a group that is legitimately weaker than you, everybody automatically recognizes that for what it is.
Yes.
Okay, a couple more of the super chats. Blood Axe says, wish I wasn't lied to about needing a degree for the work I do. Dropped out and still ended up in the industry. There's no trade school for what I do. Oh, that's good. You wasted a lot of time and money, but at least you ended up where you wanted to be, right? Iraqi Oil Money says, what the hell is wrong with truck drivers? I make $100,000 a year, home every day, no debt, and my own 3-room bed. English. No debt and own my own. Got syntax messing with brain. But he owns his own 3-bedroom house at the age of 28. That is, I believe, the gist of it. And yeah, that's the thing. No, here's the thing. People don't like truck drivers because it's a dirty job. Like that is the public perception of a truck driver. You're a big, fat, bellied dude with a cap, grease-stained fingers, holding a hot dog in one hand, standing by his big rig, going like, oh, yuck, yuck.
Citizenship.
That is the public persona of a truck driver. But as you say, truck drivers are vital for, well, everything. Literally. The food in your
red
shop.
blood cells, yeah.
Yeah, the food in your store,
I have
truck
lost.
drivers. Your Apple iPhone, truck drivers. Like literally everything.
No, but
run off
I'll
truck
tell you
drivers.
something interesting, right? Like there was this video, which this tweet, which went very viral, with this
Service guaranteed
bourgeoisie
citizenship.
young lady, who was mocking the fact that the guy who dated her was a farmer and gave her a wheel of cheese. And when you look at the quality of the cheese and the size of the cheese, it was like roughly $700. But she was mocking him, right? Because he is a farmer, and she is a university girl.
Yep.
So it's literally classism. Like when people mock the fact that you're a truck driver, I hate using the leftist language, but I cannot define it anywhere else. And Americans really don't understand this, but it's very well ingrained in Europe. There is the class thing,
Yes.
where you're like, I am better than you, even though I'm poorer,
yes.
right? Like I'm from. It's not necessarily like I'm from noble stock, but it's like I went to a university. You're a truck driver, even if you're going to earn more than me. And this is another thing. Like when I finished law school, it was during the American housing crisis, and it influenced the economy here, so it was very difficult to find a job. But I managed to find the job I was working at the time, and this is why I went to med school later on, is I worked at a hospital doing statistics, pretty much like a kind of secretary job, like you're working with the computer and talking to patients. And a lot of people were like, ew, why are you doing that? Like, you finished university. And I'm like, dude, you don't have a job. Like, shut the fuck up. Like we both finished law school, but you're unemployed, and I'm doing something to earn money, right? And I use that money to put myself through the first few years of med school. But like, this is how the mentality works, right? Like, they do not appreciate someone with a job. There are jobs that decent people do, like the journalists, right? And the jobs that bad people do, the code. This is why
Service
journalists found it
guarantees
offensive when they
citizenship.
were told to learn to code, because they're
Yes.
above the code.
Yeah.
Like, the code is for the immigrant, for the person coming from India. The code is beneath them.
Yep, absolutely. Like, class is a good word for it, and everybody understands this. And it's also because, again, it's the stereotype. It's the common perception. The truck driver is some fat, uneducated dude who couldn't be anything else. He had to become a truck driver, a lowly profession, because he couldn't hack it in education or whatever. That is the perception. Whereas in reality, truck drivers are literally indispensable. And you remember in 2021, yes, it actually says right there, when Britain decided to GTFO out of the European Union, there were no longer easy access to truck drivers from Poland, etc., and poorer countries. And suddenly, the average pay of a trucker increased by 40%.
Yes.
Because it
and
turns
people
out
were
they're
like-
necessary.
Yeah. But like the I guess like the modern leftist believes that food sprouts from the supermarket.
Yes. Like,
Like they're very educated. Because here's the thing. Like when they say, let's ban gas vehicles, everyone is like, oh, well, why don't you take the subway? And I'm like,
Fire
okay,
answer.
who's going to do the agriculture then? Right? Because you don't have electric... as far as I know, like electric trackers are very new and as an invention, and not every place has the possibility of charging them, right? But even then, the trucks, like electric trucks, are very expensive and very few in number compared to the non-electric ones.
yeah.
So, like all these people who think, oh, well, just take the subway, do not realize the economic implications and how high the prices are going to explode.
Well, again, it returns to our discussion about the debt forgiveness, right? You've got a person who has
Service
a
guarantees citizenship.
doctorate in something and goes like, "Well, just don't pay it back," as if that's going to work, because they don't know anything. For all of the knowledge they have zero wisdom. They don't understand the world, and they don't have an understanding of the bigger picture. Which is why they can look down at the truck driver, and the plumber, and the carpenter, without ever thinking about how vital these roles are to society. And like you say, with the electric trucks as well. Oh, well, why don't we just do electric trucks? Oh, I don't know, because they're twice as expensive, because we don't have the infrastructure to support them, because most of the firms that would have to buy them can't afford the enormous expense it would be to replace that entire fleet of vehicles, etc., etc. But when you're sitting in your ivory tower, you don't understand any of these things. It is literally the Marie Antoinette let them eat cake. Although that was a historical fake, by the way.
It is, it is interesting because everyone deserves an education, but you learn your LGBTs. However, you don't learn how to do your taxes, how to start a business.
Oh.
In some places, you don't even learn how to do a resume,
Yep.
right? You don't learn how electricity is made. You don't learn anything that's useful. But you learn about hyper-complex numbers, I guess, trigonometry, very important shit.
You get taught how to figure out the unknown variable in a triangle using the Pythagoras, some Greek person's theorem.
Pythagoras, yeah.
Like, I know, this triggers the shit out of me, too. It's like, when I started my own business and I needed to pay taxes, I was sitting there like, what the fuck does this mean?
I really didn't even know how to start the business, right? And this is like...
Yes, I had to fucking Google it.
Yes. But even then, it's like, look, when you start making a video game, like I don't know if you're making. I think you are, right? Is it?
V, that's very secret. Bad V.
Okay. Oh, I'm not going to go into details, but like the very fact that when you get an art, right, from someone, you need to have a commercial license.
Heresy's the question.
Like it's not the
Fire's
same like
answer.
doing a YouTube video, and you just get some art from right, and you put it there. Like you can just ask an artist to draw. Like here's the thing: you can commission art from an artist, but if you don't mention that it's for commercial rights, the artist can then charge you extra, or can even file a DMCA against you.
Well, that is one of those legalistic doohickeys, because they can and they can't. It's a very legalistic grey area, which depends a lot on nation to nation, etc. But to be safe, you need to have them sign a contract saying, okay, one, don't talk about this, and two, anything you make for me, I own. It's mine now.
Service guarantees
Yeah,
citizenship.
Well, the thing is, like, the contracts are very expensive. But what I found out that you can do, however, and this is like for any aspiring game dev or anyone that wants to make a project that they sell money. If you don't have money for a contract, what you can do is, and this is very important, make them invoice you on PayPal, and then the same email that they use for invoice, they should use it to give you the art, right? So like, let's say that the artist's name is Zuki@gmail, right? So Zuki@gmail invoices you on PayPal, and then Zuki@gmail contacts you on your business email, giving you the art and writing that he gives you permission to use the right with commercial release, blah, 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 right? So you get all the legalese there. And that is enough proof to stand in the court of law in most countries, especially in the EU.
Yes. Or you need to be able to prove it. Like, if you have chat logs, for example, saying, like, I'm going to use this in a YouTube video, for example, and they later go on, it's like, I had no idea it was for commercial use and so on.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing, but you don't learn any of this. Our entire education system is
but let me tell you
completely
something
wrong
else
for the modern
about
world.
Discord, right? Because this is also what I found out. Apparently, because Discord logs can be faked, right? So even if the conversation is still there, like if you take a screenshot of the Discord logs, or if you make a video, that does not stand up in court. This is why mail is important. With Discord, you'd have to like petition Discord themselves to give you the logs and to validate them.
Yep.
And Discord may choose not to. So no, like the best thing to do is if you run any commercial project and you're just starting up and you're not rich enough in order to have the money to do the legalese, because it's very expensive to have the contracts and shit. And it's also like some artists may not even want to sign, because they get to account like when you're doing overseas, like they would have to give their real name and their address, and some artists may not be willing to do that. Or even like some artists may be willing to sign, but like how do you know that they actually signed it? Like how do you know that that's the real name that they put there, right? So because of that, the next best thing is to only use email for business correspondence. Like you talk with people over email, and that's it. Like that is difficult to fake. It's accepted in court. So
Yep, there's a lot of complexities, and nobody ever tells you about any of it.